Okay, my name is Walter Bergonthal. I was in the Army Air Corps, rank of sergeant, and I was with the 133rd AACS, which is Army Communications System. And we were attached to the 9th Air Corps. We were, when I went to Morton High School in my junior year, the juniors and seniors went down to the cafeteria and we took tests for the Army Air Corps to enlist. It was a 4-hour test. And my buddies and I, we passed, but we went down for our physicals. All my buddies failed the physical because of heart murmur or wore glasses. At that time, I didn't wear glasses. So I was the only one that went into the Air Corps. And from there, I went down to Shepherd Field. Well, first up to Fort Sheridan, where we were inducted. And we lived in 8-man tents there. And they had German prisoners from Africa there that were serving KP in that. And they lived in the barracks where we lived outside in a tent. But we went down to Shepherd Field, and then I washed out. My eyes finally caught up with me. So I had intended hopefully to be a pilot, but so then they put me into communications. Then I went up to Chanute Field. It's right outside the University of Illinois. And then they transferred me down to St. Louis at Scott Field. And there I was the honor recipient of our group. So I was given the choice of either teaching at Langley Field or going overseas. The war was winding down, so I opted to go overseas because as a youth I had never been farther than Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, or Michigan. So I figured I'd never be able to get overseas again, so why not take the opportunity? But I didn't realize how long I'd be over there. I was over there for 21 months. Yeah. But I had taken my discharge over there because I had met my wife-to-be, who was a German war bride. And she had fled the Russians. She lived in Hainau, Germany, and the Russians were right outside of their city, and they had to flee. She fled with just the clothes on her back, and her sister was engaged to a German Luftwaffe pilot, and he said, if anything happens, go towards the American side. And my mother lives in Erlangen, so try and get there. So she made it all the way there, and that's where I met her some time back. She fled on February 8th, 1945, and we met in December of 1945. And now, when we flew overseas, first came to Paris, was in Paris, and then we were transferred into Frankfurt, which was our headquarters, and then from there went down to Fürth, Germany, which is like a suburb of Nuremberg. And the infantry had taken over this airfield, and then they moved us in for the communications. So we handled the radio teletype and the control tower. We had P-38s and P-51s stacked up, because at that time nobody knew what the Russians were going to do. So we were kind of tried to be prepared in case they wanted to continue the war. And then the Nuremberg trial started in October of 45, and our control tower would bring in the Russian, the French, the British, and American personnel that were at the lawyers that were at the trial. So because of that, we were able to attend the trials. I attended twice, but the trials that I attended, they were very boring because they lasted for a year, and all they did at the time that I was there would just read stuff out, So there was no back and forth between the Goring or any of those other people. Now, we sat up in a balcony, and we had earphones, so in case it was in Russian, it was translated, or in French, we could hear the translation, so we knew what was going on. Now, those guys sat in those chairs for a year, just about, and I can imagine some of them actually fell asleep while the trials were going on, because sitting there for 4 hours in the morning, then 4 hours in the afternoon, I mean, they just, I don't know if you'd call it bored or what, but they just couldn't keep their eyes open. Yeah, so, and then...
Who were some of the people you saw trial?
I saw all 21 of them. All 21 that were on trial. Goring, Hess, von Tribbenhoff, Spears, you just name them. We saw them all. They were just sitting in a row down there. And it was fascinating. And then we heard what each individual, what they were sentenced to. Now, some of the fellows were so indoctrinated with Hitler, when they were hung, they would say, Heil Hitler, and they hung. Now, with Goring, he was a heroin addict, and while in prison, he lost an awful lot of weight. But because of his position, I always felt there was a second lieutenant in charge of him, and every day he was given one cigar. And I think that last cigar, they put some cyanide in, and he took the cyanide and he committed suicide that way, so he wouldn't be hung. So, and some of them were set free. Some were given long sentences. Like Hess, he was in prison in Spandau outside of Berlin, and he finally, I think, committed suicide when he was about 93 years old. Yeah. But and all these fellas that were on trial, they had all high IQs. They weren't dummies. They were smart guys. But they just followed the wrong leader. Saw a movie, the Nuremberg Trials, and they always have a love thing in it. So two of the correspondents, they would go to a nightclub. Well, at that time, they didn't have nightclubs. As you can see by this picture, the Nuremberg was just leveled. Now, my wife was living in Erlangen at the time, and she witnessed the bombing of Nuremberg. The planes flew over, and she saw the bombings, Now, Erlangen was a university town, so before the troops went in, they would always give a warning, give up, and we'll not bomb your town. So the town gave up. There was just some small artillery outside of the town, but the town was saved. There was nothing bad about it, blown up or anything. So then, I was then, after Firth, I was transferred up to Erlangen, and that's in December of 45. And we had a mess hall there, and my wife and her sister and her two sisters and brother-in-law worked in the mess hall. And this way they could get food, because they were on very short rations. A ration, they got a quarter of a pound of meat per week. Go to a McDonald's, get a quarter pounder, and that's all the meat they had for a whole week. So they worked in the mess hall so they get food there, and they gave their ration cards to their parents. Now, they lived in about a room like about 8 foot by 14 foot, 6 people, because they were all refugees from the Russians. And it was bad times, but it was good times in the sense that the war was over. And I took my discharge over there because I knew we were going to get married. So it took us, the American government tried to not have you marry, and they put all blocks up to try and not do it, So it took us 6 months to get all our papers through, and so by June 17th, we got married. in Germany, in Erlangen, yeah, in a Lutheran church there. And the American government married us, the German government married us, and the town married us. So we were married 3 times. Yeah. I was a civilian then, and I was working for the American government. In fact, I was in communications as a sergeant. I was making $100 a month plus 20% overseas, $120. I went and got the job within Erlangen doing exactly the same thing, communications supervisor. They were paying me $300 a month as a civilian. So, and then I was able to eat in the officers' mess, and we were treated just as officers. So then after we got married, we went, they paid us all the way home. We went to Bremerhaven, got on a Liberty ship there, and went from there to New York. And from New York, took a train to Chicago, then took the L to Cicero. It was hard on my wife because she was so homesick for her family. And it took a long, long time, I think, until our first son was born, a couple years after we were married. And well, it took her just a long time but fortunately, we were able to get back to Germany and visit relatives and that, because her brother still was in Germany. And so I'd take a 3-week vacation, and we would travel all over Europe then with him. Well, I think today, if they still had the draft, I think it would be good. Get some of the kids off the streets, have them go into the military for a year and a half, and might straighten their lives out. But now crime in the Chicago area is so bad, and the shootings, it's pathetic. Every time you listen to the news or read the paper, so many killed, so many shot. Or if they could come back with the old CCC camp, Civilian Corps of Engineers, and they go out and plant trees and build things and things like that. Get them off the streets. Something like that should be done. That's what happened during the Depression, and it worked out very well.